Hi everyone, it's Anna, and today I'm going to be talking with you about Adobe Camera Raw. Now, what is Adobe Camera Raw, you may ask? Well, it is a RAW conversion program that is supported by Photoshop, both Creative Cloud and Creative Suite, as well as Photoshop Elements, After Effects, and Adobe Bridge. Now, what this program does is it converts raw images into a viewable image format that you can edit called DNG or digital negative, which then can be saved as either a digital negative, a TIFF, or a JPEG, whichever you prefer or whatever your needs may be. So, Camera Raw is a plugin that comes with Photoshop, and a lot of you Lightroom users out there will find that Camera Raw is very similar to Lightroom. It has a lot of the same features, and it really does the same thing that Lightroom does in that it converts a raw image into a viewable format like a digital negative or a JPEG. Also, if you're new to Photoshop and you've never used Lightroom before, don't worry because Camera Raw is extremely intuitive and easy to use. So you're going to find that this is going to be one of your essential tools to your photography. Okay, to get started, I'm going to go ahead and show you how to open up your image file. So what you'll do is go to File, Open, and then just navigate to wherever you have saved your images onto your computer. So for the sake of this video and just for ease of access, my image is saved onto my desktop here. So I'm going to just double click it and it'll open up in Camera Raw, as you can see right here. Mine says DNG because I had already converted this to a digital negative, but after shooting in RAW, depending on what camera system you use, it would either say like .nef, for example, for Nikon, and .cr2 for Canon. So just to clarify what I did, I was already in Photoshop Creative Cloud and I opened my image just like I would any other image file. Like if this were a JPEG, I opened it just like I would in that situation. And what happens when I open either a RAW or a digital negative file, Camera Raw then opens up because it's a plugin within Photoshop. So in this tutorial, I'm going to show you some of the most basic features in the top toolbar. And in the next video, in part 2, I'll show you some of the more advanced features and editing in the advanced panels here on the right. First, what I want to do is make my window full screen, and I can do that either by pressing F on my keyboard shortcut or selecting the sideways arrows here. And I'm making it full screen just so I can see the image better on my monitor. So the first icon over here on the top left is your zoom tool, which you can get to by either pressing the keyboard shortcut Z or just clicking on it. And this does exactly what it sounds like it would do. It zooms in on your image and you can just click anywhere on your image and zoom into that area. Now, what you can also do is use the plus and minus tools down here on the bottom left, and this also will zoom in and out on your image. And you can also click the drop-down menu and just select from a percentage. So I'm at 25% right here, and I really like that size on my monitor. Now, another thing that you can do if you say zoom in at 50%, you can select your hand tool, which is the next icon on the top left toolbar. And you can move around on the image just by clicking and dragging. And this is a little bit easier than scrolling in and out and back and forth. Next, I'm going to show you the white balance tool. And with this, a lot of you who use Lightroom will be familiar with this concept. So if you're new to the concept, what it is a little dropper tool that you can hover over your image, and the goal is to select what's called a target neutral. And a target neutral is basically just a true gray area that's not really super warm or super cool. It's just a basic neutral gray. Now, not every single photo is going to have a target neutral gray area in it. So you just want to find the section that is the most neutral in your image. And to know if you're doing that correctly, you'll see in the upper right hand corner under your histogram, under the or beside the letters RGB, there are numbers, and you want those numbers to line up as close as possible. And when they do, you'll know that you have found your target neutral. Now, once the numbers are as close as you can get them, you'll just click once and it will adjust the white balance. Now, for this example, my white balance was already pretty solid. So what I'm going to do now is just do a theoretical white balance for you so you can see the adjustments that it's making. So, for example, if I go to this area right here that's really, really warm and I click on it, it's going to make my image very blue because it's compensating to balance out that warm tone. And to undo an adjustment in Camera Raw, just press Control Z and it takes you a step back and undoes that adjustment. And the same would be true if I selected a portion of the image that were really cool. So in this kind of purplish blue area here, when I pressed that, everything became kind of warm and kind of a green color. And that makes sense because green is the opposite of magenta, and there was a lot of magenta in this ribbon here. So Camera Raw was compensating for that magenta. So I'm going to Control Z to undo my white balance adjustment. And now I'm going to show you the targeted adjustment tool. And what this does is allows you to click on a portion of your image where you would like to adjust either the shadows, midtones, or highlights, for example. In this image, the highlights are really blown out and there's a lot of clipping in the highlights on the dress here. So what I can do is left click once and hold down on that area. And if I move my mouse up, you can see the highlights get really, really bright. And if I move it down, we start to see the highlights being recovered in that area. And you can also do the same thing with the shadows. So I'm going to click in this really dark area up here in the upper right that is almost a true black. I mean, it's definitely shadows. And what I'm going to do is move my mouse up, and that will lighten the shadows. If I wanted to darken the shadows and add more contrast, I would move my mouse down. But for this image, I'm going to go up just a tiny bit. Next, we have the crop tool, which you can get to by pressing C as your keyboard shortcut or by pressing the crop icon. And with this, you can crop your image freehand to any dimension that you would like by using the edge of the bounding box here, just like you normally would in Photoshop or Lightroom. Another thing you can do is right click and select from custom dimensions that are really common, such as the 5:7 ratio or 9:16, which is like really panoramic. You can also create your own dimensions, and you can use the ratio, pixels, or inches. So for example, I have pixels selected here because I wanted to upload an image to Facebook, and I know that the Facebook optimized dimensions are 2048 by 1365 pixels. So that's an example of how you can use the custom crop. And when you're done, you can just press enter, and that will crop your image. Next, we have the straighten tool, which is really helpful to use when you have an image with maybe a crooked horizon line, or if you have any image that you would just like to straighten. So in this example, if I wanted to make the line of my subject's arms more of a horizontal line than a diagonal, what I would do would be to draw a line upwards at a diagonal across my image and release my mouse, And you'll see it makes a bounding box that's similar to the crop tool because that's essentially what we're doing. We're cropping the image here. So once I've drawn that line and I'm satisfied with the crop and the bounding box here, I'm going to press enter just like I did with the crop tool, and it straightened out my image. And I could keep doing that until the image is straight if I wanted to, but keep in mind that when you're using the straighten tool, it is essentially cropping your image, so you will lose a little bit of information. Now that I've shown you some of the basic overall adjustments that you can find within the top toolbar here, I want to show you some of the more fine-tuned adjustments that you'll find that will really come in handy with Camera Raw. And the first one is the spot removal tool, which is this icon. You can press it in the toolbar here, or you can press B on your keyboard for the shortcut. And this is similar to the clone stamp or the healing patch tool in regular Photoshop, and it will remove portions of your image that you do not want to be there. So it's really handy for editing skin, or if you just have something, an object or a spot in your image that you want to get rid of. So for example, I'm going to zoom in really close on my image here. I'm going to use my hand tool to go down here to the portion of the dress where it looked like there were a couple of spots on here. So in order to remove that, I am selecting my spot removal tool. I'm setting it to clone, and you can adjust the size of your brush. So in this case, 11 is plenty large enough, and you just click on the spot, and Camera Raw does the rest for you. It removes that spot, and it's sampled based on this spot down here because that's the closest thing to the spot here. And then I can just go over here and click on this spot, and it'll do the exact same thing. It will remove that spot for me. So when I'm done, I can just zoom out to, let's see, 25%. And it's removed those spots for me, and it shows me where they are. Now, if, for example, I went back to a different tool, it would remove those circles. I wouldn't be able to see where they are anymore. But if for some reason I want to reference those spots again, if I click on the the spot removal tool again, those circles where I clone will pop back up. After your spot removal tool, you will find the red eye removal tool right here, or E on your keyboard shortcut. And this is something that you may find that you're using it a little bit, but for most of us, we're not going to encounter this in our editing. But if you do, it is here for your use. After the red eye adjustment brush is just the regular adjustment brush. And this is actually a very powerful brush for the top toolbar here. And you'll see that you can adjust exposure, contrast, highlight, shadows, all to a targeted area. It's a local adjustment and not a global adjustment. So, for example, if I wanted to increase the exposure on my subjects and add some clarity, I would boost my exposure here just a little bit. The clarity looks good at positive 21. Now you can adjust the size of your brush. So my brush is very large at the moment, so you could reduce the size. Also, make sure that your brush is feathered all the way at 100. In most cases, that's what you're going to need, or else you'll end up with a harsh line at the edge of your adjustment, and it just won't look natural or blended. Also, make sure that your flow and your density are at a lower opacity than 100 to start with. This, again, will just help you create a more natural effect. So you'll see when I brush this area of my subjects here with the adjustment brush, it is increasing the exposure just a tiny bit and also adjusting the clarity. I don't know if you can see that very much here. So what I'm going to do is just make a really, really large adjustment just for the sake of this demonstration so that you can see it. I would not advise making an adjustment quite this heavy, but as you can see, it's just brushing the brightened exposure and clarity in that specific spot. Now I'm going to Control Z to undo that. And next you will find your graduated filter and your radial filter. And these again are very similar to what you'll find in Lightroom with a graduated filter. So when I click this, I can, much like the adjustment brush, I can make adjustments to exposure, contrast, and then all of my noise reduction adjustments like sharpness, moire, and noise reduction, and also defringe. So for this example, what I'm going to do is just draw the graduated filter in the top left corner here, just to brighten this area. I have it set to exposure plus 1.10, so it just brightened that area of the photo. And you can move the graduated filter around. I'm also going to do one in the bottom right corner to brighten that area as well. So those are your graduated filters, and next is your radial filter. And with this, it will make a circular or radial filter. Now, what's happening here is the inside portion of my radial filter is really dark and the outside is really bright. So what you can do, like if you wanted to create a vignette effect and brighten just the center of your image and have darker edges, what you can do is go down here and under feather, select inside. And then that way the radial filter is bright on the inside. So in this case, it's too bright. So I'm just going to reduce the exposure a bit. So that just brightened the center of my image. And you can also change the feather here. I personally add a lot of feather to my radial filters. I go all the way to 100% just to make sure that it's really natural. But you could use any of these effects with a radial or graduated filter. I've just been showing you exposure and clarity, but really the sky's the limit in terms of the radial and graduated filters. So last but not least, we have the Preferences dialog box, which you can open here. And for this tutorial, we're not going to get into this since this is just a basic overview. We're just going to stay with the factory defaults for Camera Raw. But just so you know, in the future, your preferences can be found under this box here or Control K. For PC users, and I'm assuming for Mac users it's Command K to access your Camera Raw preferences. And then finally you have just your basic rotate image 90 degrees counterclockwise, and then also rotate image 90 degrees clockwise. So you can either press L as your keyboard shortcut or just press the rotation button and it will rotate your image for you. And to undo, you could either press Control Z or just rotate the image clockwise back to where it was. So when you have finished working with your image, you can do one of a couple of things in Camera Raw. You can either go ahead and save the image, and you can save it to you can save it to any destination on your computer where you would like for it to go. You can choose from how you would like to name your document from this list here. So be sure to play around with that to name it how you would want to name it. You can make sure that it has the file extension at the end. For example, if I was saving as a TIFF, if I wanted to, I could save it as .tiff. And one thing that I really like about Camera Raw is it gives you the option to either have uppercase or lowercase. For those of us who prefer uniformity, you can have whichever you prefer. And then you can also choose, of course, the format of digital negative, JPEG, TIFF, or Photoshop, however you would like to save the file. The compatibility mode to select what versions of Camera Raw the image will be compatible with. Your JPEG preview, you can select none, medium size or full size. I usually just go with medium size for mine. And then under use lossy compression, don't check this because the whole point of working in RAW with RAW files and digital negatives is that we want there to be as much information in the image file as we can possibly have, so we don't want to compress that information at all. So do not check use lossy compression. So at this point, I would just press save, and that would be that. It would save to my computer. Now, if I wasn't ready to save it and I wanted to work with it some in Photoshop, like if I wanted to apply some actions, what I would do now would be to press Open Image, and it will open my image in Photoshop. I have Creative Cloud here. So after it opens, if I wanted to, for example, use some of my pretty actions, I could go ahead and apply these just like normal. And when I'm done with my edit, I would just go ahead and file, save as, and just go about it like you normally would. So for the example here, I'll just save it to my desktop, and again, just the normal Photoshop drop-down menu of files to save as. So for now, I'm just going to save it as a Photoshop document, which it already is here. Save it to my desktop, and we are done. So that was a crash course, basic overview of just the top toolbar in Adobe Camera Raw. So in the next tutorial, I will go into some of the more advanced panels for you guys.